She stood in the middle of the mansion, surrounded by marble floors and million-dollar silence, knowing that the next sentence could cost her everything. Naomi Brooks had learned long ago that women like her were expected to clean, to stay quiet, to disappear into the background. But this time, the truth was burning too loudly in her chest to be swallowed. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of a memory no one had ever believed. One sentence. That was all it would take to shatter a billionaire's life, reopen a wound buried for 30 years, and expose a system that decided whose pain mattered and whose didn't. Across from her stood Jonathan Hale, powerful, untouchable, unaware that the portrait behind him held a lie big enough to break him. Naomi inhaled, feeling the old anger, the old hurt, the old silence clawing at her throat. And when she finally spoke, the world she stepped into would never be the same again. Stay with this story, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about truth, power, and who gets believed. The first time Naomi Brooks spoke in the Hale estate, the room went silent in a way that didn't feel respectful. It felt dangerous. "Sir, that boy lived with me at the orphanage." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the polished calm of the mansion like glass across silk. Jonathan Hale stood beneath a chandelier, one hand resting on the back of a leather chair that cost more than most people's cars. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Around them, the house seemed to hold its breath. Marble floors, oil paintings, the quiet arrogance of money that had never been told no. Naomi felt it immediately, the weight of eyes on her back, the unspoken question that always came first. Is she confused? Is she exaggerating? Is she even reliable? She had learned that look early in life, learned how to stand still inside it. "I'm sorry," Jonathan said at last, polite, distant. "Which boy?" Naomi lifted her chin and pointed toward the portrait above the fireplace. The painting showed a child no older than 6, wide eyes, a half smile that didn't quite trust the world, the kind of face people remembered even if they tried not to. "That one," Naomi said. "We called him Daniel." Jonathan's breath caught before he could stop it. For 30 years, he had trained himself not to react, not in boardrooms, not in negotiations, not when the world took things from him without asking. But the sound of that name, spoken in her voice, broke something open. "That's my brother," he said quietly. His name was Caleb. Naomi didn't look away. "I know," she replied. The word hung between them, heavy and impossible. She could feel the skepticism forming, the question he didn't ask yet. How would you know? It was the same tone she'd heard from social workers, police officers, supervisors, the subtle disbelief reserved for Black women who remembered too much. Jonathan walked closer to the portrait. Up close, the boy's eyes were unbearable. "My brother was kidnapped," he said, "when he was 4. We never found him." Naomi's fingers tightened around the edge of her apron. She hadn't planned this moment, hadn't rehearsed it, but she had carried it for decades. "He was brought to St. Eliza Children's Home when he was 6, she said, "in Georgia. They said his parents died in a car accident. The paperwork looked official." Jonathan turned sharply. "You're certain?" She met his gaze, calm, unflinching. "I raised him," she said. "I braided his hair when he couldn't sleep. I held him when the other kids teased him for saying he had a brother who would come back for him." Jonathan laughed once, a sound too sharp to be humor. "He said that?" "All the time," Naomi answered. "They told him he was lying, that rich families don't lose children, that no one comes back for kids like him." She paused. "They told me the same thing." The silence thickened. Jonathan saw it then. Not just the memory she carried, but the cost of carrying it. How easily her words could be dismissed. How often they probably had been. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Naomi felt the old anger rise. Not loud, controlled. The kind that had learned patience because it had no other choice. "I did," she said. "I told caseworkers. I told supervisors. I told a police officer once. They smiled, they nodded. They told me I watched too many movies." She swallowed. "After a while, you learn who the world listens to." Jonathan looked away. That night, Naomi lay awake in her small room at the edge of the estate, staring at the ceiling. She had worked in houses like this before, cleaned rooms where her name was never learned, smiled through comments that weren't meant to be cruel, just careless. But this was different. She had spoken truth inside a place built to forget it. The next morning, Jonathan was waiting for her by the fireplace. "I want you to come with me," he said, "to Georgia." Naomi hesitated, not because she didn't want answers, because answers had a way of reopening wounds people like her were expected to endure quietly. "They didn't believe me then," she said. "What makes you think they'll believe me now?" Jonathan held her gaze. "Because this time," he said, "they'll have to listen." They drove south in silence. The miles stretched long and uneasy. As the city gave way to open roads, Naomi felt memories return uninvited. The smell of disinfectant, the sound of children crying at night, Caleb's small hand gripping hers, afraid to sleep in case he missed the moment his brother came back. St. Eliza Children's Home stood at the end of a cracked road, older and smaller than Naomi remembered. Paint peeled from the walls. The gate sagged on one hinge. An elderly woman opened the door. Sister Margaret Collins. When Naomi spoke her name, the nun stared at her as if seeing a ghost. "You came back," she whispered. "I never left," Naomi replied. "Not really." Inside, dust floated through beams of afternoon light. Jonathan showed the portrait. Sister Margaret's face drained of color. "That's him," she said. "The quiet one. Always drawing, always waiting by the gate." Jonathan's chest tightened. "Do you know what happened to him?" The nun hesitated. Shame flickered across her face. "He ran away," she said, "after someone told him no one was coming." Naomi closed her eyes. They searched the building room by room. In the old dormitory, Naomi stopped cold. On the wall, barely visible beneath layers of peeling paint, were words carved deep enough to survive time. "I came back." No one was waiting. Jonathan pressed his palm against the wall like it could answer him. "He came home," he whispered, "and we weren't here." Naomi stood beside him. "That's what happens," she said softly, "when the world decides some people don't matter." That night as they drove away, Jonathan broke the silence. "If he's alive," he said, "I'll find him." Naomi didn't respond right away. "Then do it right," she said, "not like a rescue, like an apology." Jonathan nodded. He didn't know yet how much he would need that lesson, and neither did the world that had taught Naomi to expect disbelief before compassion. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Do you believe the truth still matters when the world decides not to listen? The search didn't begin with hope. It began with resistance. The moment Jonathan Hale reopened the case, doors closed faster than they opened. Police departments called it administratively resolved. Records were misplaced. Files were destroyed during system upgrades. Every phrase sounded professional, clean, reasonable, and completely hollow. Naomi Brooks recognized the pattern immediately. "This is what they do," she said one evening, standing beside Jonathan in his study as folders piled up across the table. "They don't say no, they just disappear the truth." Jonathan rubbed his temples. He had spent his life forcing answers out of reluctant people. Regulators, competitors, politicians. But this was different. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a wall built over decades, reinforced by indifference. "We have money," he said. "Influence." Naomi shook her head. "That only works when the story makes people comfortable." She picked up a thin file labeled Caleb Hale, closed and flipped it open. "This story," she said quietly, "makes people nervous." They hired private investigators, former federal analysts, data specialists, people who knew how to dig where the system preferred silence. And still, progress came slowly. Everywhere Naomi went with them, she felt the shift. At county offices, clerks addressed Jonathan directly, even when Naomi asked the questions. In one police station, an officer glanced at her badgeless presence and asked Jonathan, "Is she with you?" Naomi smiled politely. She had learned how to survive that smile. But one afternoon, the mask cracked. They were at Riverside Community Hospital in Tennessee, combing through decades-old emergency admissions. A gray-haired archivist scanned the screen, then frowned. "There's a Daniel Hale listed here," he said, age 17, admitted after being found injured on a rural road. Jonathan leaned forward. "That's him." The archivist hesitated, then looked at Naomi. "Are you family?" he asked her. She felt the familiar sting, not anger yet, something colder. I raised him, she said. The man cleared his throat. We can only release records to immediate relatives. Jonathan stood. She's with me. The archivist nodded instantly and turned back to the screen. Naomi didn't thank him. The file showed fragments, a concussion, partial memory loss, notes describing a quiet black teenager who drew constantly and refused to give his full name. One line stood out. Patient asked repeatedly about an orphanage in Georgia. Jonathan's hands trembled. He was trying to come back, he said. They drove to Savannah County again, only to find St. Eliza abandoned. Ivy crept along the brick walls. Windows were boarded. Silence filled the air where children once cried. Inside, Naomi found the wall. The words still haunted her. I came back. No one was waiting. Jonathan stared at it for a long time. I failed him, he said. Naomi turned toward him sharply. No, she said. The system failed him, and it failed you. Don't rewrite history to make the pain easier. He met her eyes. I built my life on control, he admitted. This proves how little I had. That night, something changed. The investigation accelerated, not because the clues improved, but because Jonathan stopped leading with power and started listening. Naomi took over interviews. She spoke to former shelter workers, street volunteers, community artists, people the investigators hadn't considered relevant. She found them easily, because they listened to her. One man at a soup kitchen recognized the description immediately. Quiet painter, he said. Went by Caleb sometimes Daniel. Always said he was waiting for someone. Another volunteer added, he hated paperwork, said papers lied about him. Finally, a lead came through from a social worker in North Carolina. There's a man in Clearwater Ridge, she said over the phone. Paints portraits at the weekend market, never talks about his past, but something about your description fits. Jonathan felt the air leave his lungs. Naomi closed her eyes. Before they left, the story leaked. A local reporter caught wind of the reopened case. A missing child, a billionaire, a black woman who claimed to know the truth. The headline read, Billionaire reopens cold case. After Maid's allegation, Naomi stared at the screen. Maid, she said flatly. Jonathan slammed the laptop shut. I'll shut this down. No, Naomi replied. Let it breathe. He looked at her. They're not questioning you, she continued. They're questioning whether someone like me deserves to be believed. The comments were worse. Why didn't she speak up sooner? Sounds like a money grab. Funny how these stories come out when there's wealth involved. Jonathan read them in silence. Naomi didn't. I've lived with this noise my whole life, she said. You haven't. The drive to Clearwater Ridge felt endless. When they arrived, the market was alive with color. Music drifted between stalls. Children laughed. Then Naomi stopped. Under a striped canopy, a man sat at an easel, painting a little girl's portrait. His posture was relaxed, his expression focused, his hands steady. Jonathan's heart knew before his mind could catch up. That's him, Naomi whispered. She stepped forward first. Caleb, she said softly. The man looked up. Confusion flickered. Then something deeper. Recognition that didn't yet have language. Naomi, he said. Her breath caught. Jonathan stepped closer. I'm your brother. The man stared at him. 30 years of separation pressed into a single moment. Jonathan pulled out the folded drawing, the house, the piano, the two boys. Caleb's hands began to shake. I dreamed of this, he whispered. I thought I was crazy. Jonathan reached out. You were never forgotten, he said. Around them, the market fell quiet. Two brothers stood facing each other, reunited not by luck, but by a woman the world had tried to ignore. Naomi watched as Caleb broke down, years of waiting collapsing into tears. For once, no one looked away. Caleb Hale didn't step into Jonathan's world all at once. He circled it first, the way someone does when they have learned that beautiful places can still be dangerous. The Hale estate felt unreal to him. The ceilings were too high, the silence too intentional. For years, home had meant borrowed couches, shelters that closed at dawn, rooms where he never unpacked because he never stayed. Here, everything was permanent, heavy, expectant. Naomi watched him closely during those first days. She noticed how he paused before sitting on furniture, as if afraid of doing something wrong. How he flinched when staff spoke too loudly. How his eyes tracked exits without thinking. Trauma didn't disappear just because the address changed. One evening, Jonathan found Caleb standing alone in the music room, staring at the old piano beneath a dust cover. "Our mother used to play," Jonathan said softly. Caleb nodded. "I remember the sound, not the details, just how it made the house feel safe." Jonathan lifted the cover and pressed a single key. The note echoed, fragile and unfinished. Caleb closed his eyes. For a moment, the past didn't hurt. It breathed. But healing was never going to be simple. Within days, the story exploded. Cable news debated it. Social media dissected it. Commentators argued over timelines and credibility. And once again, the spotlight turned where it always did. Naomi. Some called her brave. Others called her suspicious. Why did she wait so long? Why didn't she have proof? Why should anyone believe her now? Jonathan read the articles in anger. Caleb read them in silence. "They're not questioning me," Caleb said one night. "They're questioning whether someone like her could tell the truth." Naomi didn't respond right away. "I've spent my life being believable only when it was convenient," she said finally. "This time, it doesn't have to be." Jonathan made a decision that night. He stood in front of cameras the next morning, not in a tailored suit, but in a simple jacket. Naomi and Caleb stood beside him. "I didn't find my brother because of money," Jonathan said. "I found him because society taught me not to listen, to refuse to stay silent." He turned toward Naomi. "She didn't just remember my brother," he continued. "She protected his humanity when no one else would." The questions came fast. Jonathan answered none of them. Instead, he stepped back. Naomi stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "I wasn't believed because I'm black," she said. "Because I was a woman. Because I worked in places people don't look twice at. But the truth doesn't need permission to exist." The room went quiet. Not the dangerous silence from before, a listening one. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan didn't pursue vengeance. He didn't chase the woman who had falsified the papers. He didn't demand headlines. Instead, he built something. The Quiet Promise Foundation. Its mission was simple, relentless, public, to reopen forgotten cases, to fund legal reviews for missing children of color, to support the caregivers who remembered when the system didn't. Naomi didn't want her name on the building. "Make it about them," she said, "not me." Caleb designed the foundation's symbol, two children holding hands beneath a single piano key. Not perfect, honest. The opening ceremony wasn't lavish, no champagne, no celebrity speeches, just families, parents who had waited, siblings who had searched, social workers who had been ignored. Caleb stood at the edge of the crowd, unsure. Jonathan leaned over. "You don't have to speak." Caleb shook his head. "I do," he said. He stepped up, hands trembling. "I spent years thinking I was invisible," he said. "Turns out I was erased. There's a difference, and it matters." People listened. Naomi stood in the back, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. For the first time, the world wasn't looking past her. Later that night, the three of them sat on the porch as the estate settled into something that finally felt like a home. Caleb sketched while Jonathan read. Naomi watched the stars. "I don't know what my future looks like," Caleb said, "but I know it's mine." Jonathan nodded. "And I know my success means nothing if it only serves me." Naomi smiled. "Then maybe," she said, "we finally learned something." The piano inside played softly as Jonathan pressed the keys again. This time, Caleb joined him. The melody wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it belonged to them. Before we end, let me ask you something. Did this story change the way you think about who gets believed? Do you think Naomi's truth would have been heard if Jonathan hadn't stepped aside? And do you believe healing is possible without justice being loud? If this story moved you, comment 111 below. Tell us which country you're watching from. And if you think this message matters, please share the video so others can hear it too.